Hollywood Palace will not be seen tonight, so that we may bring you the following special program from ABC News. Watch Hollywood Palace next week at its usual time. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, Democrat of New York, versus Senator Eugene J. McCarthy, Democrat of Minnesota, appearing in their first official confrontation on ABC News Issues and Answers, a special report. To moderate this joint appearance, ABC News anchorman Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. Tonight, two declared aspirants for the presidential nomination of the Democratic Party are in the same room before the same television cameras and radio microphones to engage in a discussion, or if you will, a debate on the issues, the problems, and the opportunities that confront the American people this year. This program comes at a significant, perhaps a critical time for both Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York and Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota. Next Tuesday, the Democratic voters of California, in their primary election, will express their preference. Both Senator Kennedy and Senator McCarthy are on the ballot in this state. Both have campaigned extensively and vigorously. They will be questioned tonight by ABC News correspondent Bob Clark and ABC News political editor Bill Lawrence. We shall alternate questions. Bob Clark.
Senator McCarthy, the McCarthy for President Committee, your McCarthy for President Committee, has been running full-page ads in California papers in recent days saying that Senator Kennedy must bear part of the responsibility for the decision to intervene in Vietnam. And the implication seems to be that even though he's been a war critic for the past 3 years, he should be ruled out as president because of his participation in that decision in the Kennedy administration. Is that what you mean?
I don't think we said he should be ruled out at all, Bob. He has said he'd take some responsibility for it. The question is how much responsibility. I was talking more about the process. I said this is one of the things we ought to talk about, is the process by which decisions were made with reference to this war. Because one of our problems has been to find out, who decided and who's responsible and on what kind of evidence did we have this kind of escalation.
Could I just
and I'd say that ad ran only one day, and that I had not seen it.
It also said that I intervened in the Dominican Republic.
That's
how
right.
did they get that?
Well, I think what they did, I
wasn't even in government at the time.
Well, you weren't out very long, but I don't want to fault you on that.
But it said it, and then it ran again today.
It ran only, we stopped it, it may have run in 2 papers, but I don't think it ran twice.
Well, I saw it again this morning, and I was
They might have
responsible for the
shown it
Dominican
to you.
Republic. I wasn't even in the government, and I criticized it.
Well, what I said was that this was a process that was involved in our going into Cuba, involved in our going to the Dominican Republic, and also into Vietnam, and that I wanted to talk about the process. But in any case, I had not seen the ad. When I saw it, I said, stop it, and they stopped it as soon as they could, which is not quite what happened to the voting record of McCarthy, which was distributed across the country, which is being mailed out in this state right now.
Is continuing. Would you like to respond to that, Senator?
I don't know to what he was referring to.
Well, I have it in my pocket.
Senator Kennedy, you did get very upset about that ad in a speech.
Well, I think he had some reasons. I got somewhat upset over what was said to be my voting record. But they were nice in this guy. They took a picture of me when I was about 40 years old. Which I looked young, and it's a good comparison. I'm young in spirit. I'm about that young.
But you used these words on Friday. You said the great crusade that began for the United States is now involved in a campaign to distort me and to stop me. Did you mean or did you feel at that time that Senator McCarthy was trying to distort you or stop you?
That was distortion of the record, and which I think Senator McCarthy just agreed to. It was a distortion of the record.
Can I ask both
you? To my question, though, gentlemen, as to whether, aside from Vietnam, you really are in basic agreement with the general foreign policy objectives of this administration. Are you, Senator McCarthy?
It depends on what their objectives are. I'm not quite sure what their objectives in Europe are, for example. I don't think things were handled well there, that we could have dealt on somewhat better terms with France to a point where at least the NATO control in communication lines might not have been taken out, and the additional expense of transferring all of that could have been avoided. I don't think we acted properly in the Dominican intervention. We completely ignored the Organization of American States and picked it up kind of as a residual support of our action, but largely really ignoring the OAS and what we'd committed ourselves to in that. And I think that through the years we've not really used the United Nations as we should have. This is not the policy question, but using the ambassador pretty much as a simple agent of the administration instead of insisting that he represent us really in terms also of the United Nations Charter. Generally, we've acted as though the UN had application to countries in the Eastern Hemisphere, not to the Western Hemisphere, and really had nothing to do not much to do with problems in which the United States was involved. So these are all questions of foreign policy, on which I disagree. They're not as serious, I suppose, at least in practical consequence as Vietnam, but these are points of disagreement.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I was a member of the National Security Council for 3.5 years, and was involved in some of those matters during that period of time in connection with Latin America and in connection with Africa, with the Test Ban Treaty, and I suppose the most critical crisis that's ever been faced by mankind, the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. I don't think that we can ignore the rest of the world. I don't think we can act as if it doesn't exist and then separate ourselves from the rest of the world. And we have to be obviously interested and concerned about what occurs elsewhere. But what I think we have to make it clear, and which we did, I think, during the early 1960s, was that we can't be the nation's policeman. We cannot settle every struggle or every problem that exists everywhere, all over the globe, and the internal struggle that goes on between one power group versus another power group within, whether it's Latin America or whether it's in Asia. On the other hand, we can't ignore what happens. For instance, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the missiles coming into Cuba. What if the same kind of arrangement was made in another Latin American country? That threatens our national security. We not only have, therefore, some national responsibility and possibly a moral responsibility in some ways, but we also have an arrangement that meeting our national security needs is vital and terribly important for the next generation of Americans, because we now have the weapons that can destroy all of mankind.
Senator Kennedy, if we can move on here to some of...
I'd like to give each of you a couple of minutes to just speak to the country and say why you should be the next president of the United States. Senator Kennedy?
Well, I've had as I mentioned, the experience in the executive branch of the government, the National Security Council, as Attorney General of the United States. I was involved in the three great questions that affect our country: the problems of peace, the problems of races getting along together, and the problems of the development of the problems of riots and violence in this country. I think that based on that experience and the work that I've done in the Senate of the United States, as well as in the executive branch of the government, that and the experience I've had, the Test Ban Treaty, the Cuban Missile Crisis, that perhaps there is something that I can contribute in the cause of peace, of trying to end the conflict that now exists in Vietnam. And as Thomas Jefferson said, standing for the last best hope of mankind, which we are in this country. We dealt with the problems of riots while I was Attorney General of the United States, and we also dealt with the problems of equal justice. I think it's very easy to talk in generalities, but I've sponsored specific pieces of legislation. In the last analysis, however, it's up to the people of California and it's up to the people of the United States to make their judgment and determination about any of us. I'm going to dedicate myself, no matter what happens, to the betterment and improvement of this country and the people, and the choice really is up to you, and I'm glad that it is that way.
Senator McCarthy?
I've served in the Congress for 20 years, 10 years in the House and 10 years in the Senate, and in that time I think I've served on nearly every one of the critical committees. I've served on agriculture. I think I know something of the problems of rural America. I've served on the Committee on Interior, and I think therefore I know something about the problems of the resources of this country. I've served on the Banking and Currency Committee, and also my background is economics, and therefore I think really fully qualified to deal with the very complicated economic problems, both domestic ones and also the international trade problem and the balance of payments. I've served on both the Ways and Means Committee of the House and the Finance Committee of the Senate, which I think gives me a full familiarity with the tax problems of this country, and on foreign relations for some 5 years. In addition to that, since 1949, we've been involved in the problem of civil rights. Not only that, but the problem of the migratory workers. I was the first, back in '52, to begin to raise the question about them. And whereas I may not get the same kind of immediate response from them, I think that when they begin to look at my record, they will say, here is someone who's been concerned about us for a long, long time. He may not have received any publicity, but he saw what our needs were, and he began to anticipate that something had to be done about those needs. And I believe that on that basis, the problem of reconciliation with the races will be no particular problem. Secondly, I think that in this year I sensed what this country needed. Namely, that it needed and wanted a challenge to the President of the United States on the policies of Vietnam and priorities for America. And I think there's something to be said for a president or a presidential candidate who can somehow anticipate what the country wants, especially when what they want is on the side of good and justice, and to provide not real leadership in the sense of saying you've got to follow me, but at least to be prepared to move out ahead somewhat so that the people of the country can follow. And thirdly, I think that I sensed what the young people of this country needed, and whereas young students were dropping out and were saying the establishment is no good, we've had a genuine reconciliation of old and young in this country. And the significance of that is, I think, that through the whole country now there's a new confidence in the future of America. It's a projection of this country in trust, which has always been the character of this country, and it's in that mood and that spirit that I would act as President of the United States.
Thank you very much, Senator McCarthy and Senator Kennedy. I think we can leave it to others to determine how much heat has come from this program, but I trust there may have been some light, and for that we're all grateful.
Thank you very much.
My thanks, too, to Bob Clark, Bill Lawrence. This is Frank Reynolds in San Francisco. Good night. Strangled if you were around, Senator.
Well, I think we just about got off.
Very gentle.
Well, cream puff Lawrence.